I kid you not, he mulched with chocolate. Oh, hello. Sorry, don't mind me. I'm just doing some extremely heavy reading on planting vegetables for the garden. Now, one thing I'm really good at is research, especially when it comes to plants. Something I'm not very good at though is technology. What I'm going to do in this video is cover the different things that I came across. So this year I wanted to dive in and plant garlic. And after poring over scientific journals and meeting with my very intelligent consultants.
So we have to figure out how to get the garlic into the soil. How do we get the garlic into the soil? Is that where we put it? We just have to dig a hole, just like that. We dig a hole down, and then we put the garlic in the hole. Genius!
I realized that there is a insane amount of information out there. Like, just type in how to plant garlic on Google and it's bound to be overwhelming. At least that's what I found. And I am somebody that enjoys having a lot of information. So in this video, from a beginner to a beginner, I'm going to be narrowing down all the information that I came across and making it relevant to Southern Ontario so that hopefully you don't feel the same overwhelm that I found. Let's jump into it. Welcome, I am Christine and this is Buying Time, a channel where we cover gardening in Southern Ontario and nature activities that can be for the whole family to come together. If that sounds like something you are interested, make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that like so that we know that this is content that you enjoy. So we're going to cover this in very much a high school journalistic who, what, where, when, why, how style format. And we're going to start off with when. So right now I'm filming this around middle to the end of November, and in Southern Ontario it is still okay to plant garlic. So if you've been wondering, this is your answer. You can click out now and go plant your garlic and I won't take any offense to that. But as long as the ground is still workable, which means that you can still get a shovel into it, you can still plant garlic. It doesn't matter if we have had frost, it doesn't even matter if we have had snow. So sometimes you can still plant garlic in our area into December, and even on some weird freak winters, you can even get away with it possibly into January. And the same goes for any other spring bulbs, such as your tulips or your daffodils. As long as the ground is workable, it will take a bulb because you can get it in there. Now, how this works is that the Earth's core is heating up the soil, and so the soil, when it is in ground, is going to be at a warmer temperature than the ambient air around us is. So even if we have had frost and we've had snow, a lot of times the ground still hasn't frozen up yet. And as long as the ground is not frozen, it can still put down some roots and set up a foundation for bearing new crops next year. So the catch with garlic is that you don't want to plant it too soon. You don't want to plant it too early in the season. It's actually probably going to be a bit better if you plant it too late rather than too early. And what happens if you plant it too early is it will start to grow this fall. Now, it's not going to be the end of the world if you already have shoots coming up. They will die off when frost and winter hits, and what it signifies is that you have a really good root ball forming around those cloves. But ideally, you don't want the bulb to expend all of its energy this fall in growth. You want it to conserve that energy so that it can carry itself through winter and sprout next spring. So planting a bit later rather than earlier is going to be key. Now, to figure this out, because everybody's area is going to be a little bit different, you can look back at historical figures where you can document your garden space like I've been doing every single month. But for us in Toronto, at least, November, you can still cut the grass. It's almost a guarantee every single year that we're going to have weird fluctuations, same thing with October. So to plant things into November is not uncommon. Now, if you go about an hour or so north of the city, that's going to definitely change, and you're probably not going to have quite the same luxuries into November. There's normally going to be snow. It's going to be quite a bit cooler up there. So say an hour north of the GTA, you're probably going to be planting it in October. Within the GTA and even south of the GTA into the Niagara region and the Greenbelt down there, you can really plant into December even. So what are you planting? Now, As a beginner, this part was probably the most confusing part for me. I look at garlic in my kitchen and I hear you plant cloves, and it seemed too simple, it seemed too easy, and I couldn't quite wrap my head around this part of the process. So yes, you just plant a clove of garlic, the same clove that you would be eating, that is what you are planting. But the difference between seed garlic and culinary garlic comes down to size and variety. So a lot of the garlic that we have available to us in grocery stores here in Ontario and probably most of North America is not local to North America. It is grown in China, and it's not necessarily going to be a hardy variety for our region. And it is also possibly grown in questionable conditions and things. If you take pride in your soil or pride in your garden, then you may not want to be introducing that sort of quality into your garden space, but that is personal preference for many people. And it's not to say that that garlic is not plantable. It's just not preferable for most gardeners. So seed garlic versus culinary garlic comes down to size of the bulb and size of the clove. You want as much energy as possible stored in those bulbs. So you are going to save, if you've grown garlic before, your biggest bulbs and eat your small bulbs. And that comes down to the difference between culinary and seed garlic, which means you can go to any grocery store, any farmer's market, and you can pick up local to Canada garlic, and you can, in theory, plant it. You want to make sure that the variety that you are choosing is going to be a hardy variety, but if the label, the tag, or the farm that you are getting it from is in Canada, in theory, it's going to be a hardy variety. So that is kind of the rule of thumb around that. Most people end up getting theirs from farmers markets. I ended up, I never got around to any farmers markets this year. So I ended up finally finding some bulbs at Sheridan, but before that I was not able to find any anywhere, and so I ordered some in from a farm in Manitoba. And if this garlic can survive in Manitoba, my garden is going to be cushy by comparison. So I ordered mine from Real Garlic, which I will leave linked below in case you want to check them out. They do have a number of varieties of garlic available, but garlic goes fast. And I guess that's another thing when it comes to when do you start planting for garlic? Start planting it in August. Even though we aren't planting it until, say, October or November, garlic gets gobbled up so fast, and it will store and keep as long as you store it correctly. But if you want certain varieties, you are going to want to get your hands on that as soon as possible. So where are you planting your garlic? Can you plant it in containers? Can you plant it in the ground? Do you need to be doing anything special to it? Yes, yes, yes. So the rule of thumb, because you are trying to overwinter this, is that you are not going to plant it in containers, or even raised beds for that matter. But that is all going to be relative. Raised beds that are, say, 8 to 12 inches and are attached to the ground, which means that they are not mounted on a driveway or a concrete pad, but they are attached to the earth's soil and therefore are partaking in that core heat from earth. Those you can plant in, no problem. Anything that starts to get a little bit taller, so if you have raised beds that are, say, 18 inches high, they are now impacted by the atmosphere's weather and less impacted by the Earth's core heat. So they're going to be more exposed to the freeze-thaw cycles, which is what we are trying to protect our garlic cloves from. So the general advice that is out there is that you are planting garlic in the ground. You are not planting it in pots, you are not planting it in raised beds, and in ground is the shoo-in. But I like to push boundaries. I like to see what's actually possible. And if my garlic was able to survive in Manitoba, why can't it survive a little extreme Toronto weather? So I planted mine in my raised bed that is low, and I filled up that area. But I also put some into my higher raised beds, but I kept it along the center line of that. And that way it had a vast amount of it had about 2.5 feet or 600 or so millimeters on either side to buffer and create that insulation factor. and they are attached to the ground. They are not on a concrete pad. And then I also, to push the boundaries a little bit further, put some into my very large grow bags. They are 55 and 65 gallons. So once again, they have a bulk of soil. They aren't just your typical 12-inch pot. And I put some in my blueberry barrel out front as well, because that has been able to overwinter blueberries in my area without any special treatment. So with that thickness of the oak barrel, I figure it should have some pretty good luck. I also have hyacinths and daffodils in there, and the bulbs for that have overwintered, so why shouldn't garlic? So we'll see it. If it doesn't work out, it's like a few bulbs of garlic that I've lost here and there, and it's really no big deal. Now, because we are planting garlic in the fall, and it will become ripe and ready for harvesting. Ripe. Does garlic really get ripe? It will become ready for harvesting at the end of July, beginning of August in our area. It's going to be taking up a big part of real estate, or a big portion of real estate in your garden beds. So you want to be cognizant when planning, because it's valuable space, especially with urban gardens. We don't have sprawling acres that we can just designate a certain zone to garlic. So you want to consider succession planting and interplanting with garlic in order to kind of get the best bang for your buck when it comes to real estate. There are also certain plants when it comes to companion planting that are said to enhance the flavor of garlic, such as chamomile. That one is supposed to be a shoo-in for making your garlic taste that much better. I can't say if it makes the chamomile taste any better, but one of the areas in my raised beds, I normally have chamomile there anyway, and so I have put some of my garlic bulbs in that zone and then separated out the rest to another zone, and we're going to see if it actually makes any difference or not, and time will tell with that one. But rumor has it chamomile will make it taste better. As for the rest of your garden space, some really good companion plants when it comes to real estate is going to be starting off leafy greens. So your garlic will already be in the ground, and then in early spring you can come in and put in lettuce or spinach and other smaller leafy greens that will have a quick turnaround, a quick germination and harvest rate, and that way they will be pulled out kind of early to midsummer, and then your garlic will come out shortly after that. Now, to plant something to have that then carry into the fall, you can start looking into broccoli or Brussels sprouts, or even another round of tomatoes that you could put in there, because when you're planting them, they're still going to be quite small. You'll be able to get around it to get to your garlic. But then as those plants grow, your garlic will be out, and now they'll be able to fill in and take over that space. And then by the time you're ready to plant garlic again in the fall, you will have harvested those, and the cycle continues. So how to plant the garlic itself? This was where there are a lot of really interesting ideas out on the World Wide Web. And actually somebody local to me that I reached out to, Sean from Crooked Farms, I had mentioned him in my last video as well. He has been growing garlic in his space for a few years now, and he also has access to some really interesting material as far as fertilizer and nutrients or mulch goes for the garden because of his composting business. So for him, what he did this year, he already had the garden somewhat prepped and ready to go, and then he introduced chocolate into his space. I kid you not, he mulched with chocolate. Let me show you.
So you see here I've got a little bit of compost, and over top of it some cocoa husk shells in a powdered form from Soma Chocolate Maker in the west end of town, and it smells delicious. Maybe if anything, nothing else happens, maybe we create garlic chocolate or chocolate garlic or something to that effect. For now, it'll give us a bit of a phosphorus boost in with the compost, the mature compost matter here. And so we're going to stir this together, give it a good raking together. And so what we really just need to do is kind of put it on top a little bit, and then dig our cloves in and mulch with straw on top, and we're off to the races.
Now, I can't claim anything crazy like doing chocolate in my garden, but if that somehow changes the flavor of his garlic, I may have to consider doing that, because it is a wacky, wild idea. But the idea behind it, as he mentioned, is that it adds a nutrient boost of phosphorus. And phosphorus is really good for root development, which is what we want to focus on for overall plant health and getting that plant through the winter. Now, what I did was I had amended my garden beds a few weeks prior with compost tea, also from Sean, and I had just poured that onto the dilution that he had recommended, and then I didn't get back to my garden as planned. So it sat there and kind of cooked away, and then I came in when I was ready to plant and I did a light weed. I'm on team no-till or light to minimal till. I prefer a more permaculture, don't disturb the soil sort of approach to most of my gardening. So once my garden beds are set, other than just kind of separating the soil so I can get a plant in there, I don't till it up, I don't dig it up. And that was, I think, one of the biggest differences between what I saw available on the internet for prepping your garden beds and how I would do things in my garden space. The reason that you would till for garlic is that because it is a root, you want it to have really fluffy soil so that it can grow without a lot of barriers and be able to get big and juicy. But the problem with tilling is that you are breaking down the soil structure, which actually causes compaction long term, and you become dependent on tilling. So if you are tilling every single year, you will have to keep tilling in order to keep that fluffy stature, because the natural mechanisms of the soil are being destroyed with each and every till. Alternatively, if you are working towards more of a permaculture, or what is also called regenerative, can't speak today either, gardening approach, then you are feeding the soil and feeding the structure, and it will create that fluffy, loamy soil texture that you are after without having to have any of the invasive mechanisms such as tilling. But that takes time. So if you have really kind of crappy clay soil and this is your first year and you want to dive right in there, don't feel guilty about tilling it, but consider altering your soil in a more holistic approach moving forward so that you don't have to become dependent on tilling moving forward. There are so many really freaking cool suggestions for how to space and plant. People use yardsticks like Sean.
72 cloves of garlic, a 9x8 grid, using our favorite found object, an old dressmaker's yardstick from Toronto, 265 Queen Street West. I was able to use my finger as the drill. Basically, the soil is so loose right now and nice that I can just put my finger in there, wiggle it around a little bit, and that pretty much creates about 4 inches down for the clove to go in. Why we're able to get this kind of looseness in the soil has been largely due to the application of the compost tea over the last number of years.
People have made wheels that they roll along their fields out of old wire spools, and they have little pegs all in them so that it's evenly spaced. There are some really, really cool ideas. I didn't have any of that. This is my first year and I just wanted to get down to it. So I literally just dug a trough through it, which was probably the most invasive part of the process to my soil structure. I just dug the trough down and then I was able to line them all up in that trough and then just push the soil back over. And that works. It's not rocket science. My spacing may have not been absolutely perfect, especially with a little helper helping me out. So once I got my garlic rows dug out and I got my garlic planted out at approximately 4 to 6 inches apart and 2 to 6 inches deep, all of it was done like this, which is how I do most of my gardening. And after that, you can top it off with compost, or you can just do what I did and just toss straw on top of it. And you want to mulch, especially in Canada, you want to mulch your garlic. And once again, this is to help get it through that freeze-thaw cycle and get it overwintered. I'm sure if you don't mulch it and you have it in the right microclimate, or you have it deep enough, it's still going to be okay. But what you're trying to prevent happen is that bulb heaving itself out of the soil. And because garlic, you don't want to plant it too deep so that it doesn't waste all of its energy in trying to just come up through the surface of the soil, it is going to be closer to the surface and therefore exposed to that freeze-thaw cycle again. So mulch. Straw is by far the most economical if you are purchasing mulch. Otherwise, you can just use leaves that have fallen in your garden space. Pine material, like any kind of yard waste, you can mulch on top of your garden beds with that. You can go out and purchase other types of mulches. But straw, especially if you have it like I do for fall decor, this is a great opportunity to repurpose that and make it worthwhile in your garden space. There were a lot of really interesting tactics for cracking garlic and figuring out how to open up that bulb and get to those individual cloves. And one of the things that I had learned is that you don't want to pre-peel any of your garlic. You want to have it peeled day of, because you don't want that clove to dry out. So the bulb has all of the papery material over the outside of that you can peel off, but you don't want to end up peeling the individual clove of garlic on the day of. You just want to focus on getting the material off of that bulb. So it's different than getting it right down to the base that you would be eating a clove of garlic. You don't want it to get down to that level. If you are at the point where you would eat it, you've gone too far. So you want to leave the skin on the clove, but you want to take it off of the bulb and splitting it. And I found that the easiest method for splitting apart the bulbs on a hardneck variety was to smack it. I love this. It ended up being a lot of fun. My little one was helping me out with this as well. And you just flip it upside down and you smack it against a firm surface. So if you have a larger area and you don't have anything other than a shovel with you, the back of the shovel will work perfectly fine. I use the edges of my garden bed, and you smack it and it will pop the core, that hard neck, and the root out the bottom of it, and then it all just falls apart into your hand. And it takes no time at all. It saves your fingernails, it saves your fingers. It was really quite simple to crack all of the cloves. And I ended up, how many did I plant? Almost 200 cloves of garlic. So I had a lot of peeling and cracking to be doing as a first timer. I was probably a little overzealous, but I was just shy of 200 cloves that went into the ground for me. And this was by far the easiest method that I came across for cracking and getting into your garlic. Soaking was another concept that I came across. And it seems that soaking is used if you have any concerns for issues with your garlic. So if there's like a fungicide or a pest that has gotten into your crop, and you want to make sure that that's not going to be transferring into your soil. And it also seems to be used for helping it to sprout. So if you are in a more northern climate, it's kind of like pre-sprouting, I really can't speak today, your pea seeds. So before you plant peas, a lot of people will sprout them first, or soak them first rather, in order to help them to sprout down the road, because it helps to break down the outer part of that seed coating and just save some of the energy once again, so that the bulb doesn't have to output as much energy into breaking through that. It can have a little helping hand. In Southern Ontario, that does not seem to be necessary whatsoever. And it's really just another step that is quite unnecessary and potentially messy and could almost open up more issues. And so it was not something that I applied to my space. But if you do come across soaking garlic, this is why. Now, as you may have noticed, I did some experimenting once again with this crop. And if you are wondering why I like to experiment so much, make sure to check out this video here, where I go into ways that you can enhance your own skills to develop a green thumb and become a better gardener. And experimentation is one of those skills. So if you enjoyed this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in a future video.